Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody is doing fine. I think we should take the national anthem. Yeah, so we're going to play the national anthem and we will observe that for a few minutes.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign fatherland. Our flag shall be a symbol that truth and justice reign. In peace or battle honored, and this we count as gain. To hang on to our children a banner without stain. O God of all creation, grant this our one request. Help us to build a nation where no man is oppressed. And so with peace and plenty, Nigeria may be blessed.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Whether you are joining us as a policymaker, an environmental advocate, a student, a researcher, a business leader, or you're just simply someone who cares about the future of our planet, I welcome you here today. We are excited to have you with us. I know some of you are joining from our offices. Some of you are joining from home, from school, and a few of us are probably even pretending to be in a meeting while secretly attending this webinar. Don't worry, your secret is safe with us. All right, so thank you for taking the time to join us today. This today is not just going to be another webinar. It's going to be a conversation about our homes, our communities, our livelihoods, our future. Because climate change is something that is no longer something we read about in reports. It is or we watch in international news or challenge or channels. We are experiencing it firsthand. So before we begin, let me ask you a simple question. I'll just ask everybody on the call a simple question. Side note, please feel free to use the comment section for your questions all through the course of the webinar. Just type in your questions there and we will answer them. There will also be poll pop-ups, right? So you can engage in them too as well. Right. Okay, so how many of us have had experiences where we left home under the heat in the afternoon and then it started raining? We left home and by afternoon it started raining so hard, right? I think the other day, Seth, I even had that was yesterday or day before yesterday. I had an experience too like that. Or we spent hours in traffic because like the roads are flooded after a brief rain. Shout out to Lagosians on this one. I know that in Lagos and traffic 5 and 6. But if any of these things sound familiar to you, then you've already experienced the realities of climate change. So when people hear climate change and they think it's far, they think is millions of kilometers away, or they think that it's about polar bears or something. No, it's not. Climate change is happening, and it's happening to us all here. All right. Okay. So Okay. So once again, I welcome everyone, and this year's theme is a global call for climate action. And this reminds us that while climate change is a global challenge, solutions must be rooted in local realities. So throughout this session, we encourage active participation. Feel free to share your thoughts, your observations, your questions, using the chat box and Q&A section. We want this to be as engaging and as interactive as possible. So now to set the tone for today's event, we would be receiving the welcome address.
A-Line Media Limited is a strategic communications and advisory firm. We empower businesses in Nigeria and internationally to achieve their goals through effective communication, brand building, and impactful sustainability and ESG strategies. We offer a range of services, including custom publishing, corporate events, and learning experiences, all designed to meet your unique needs. Our services speaks for itself. We've partnered with multinational leaders in telecommunications, finance, and oil and gas to deliver impactful results. From crafting powerful educational materials to implementing effective ESG strategies, we help organizations achieve their goals. Ready to achieve impactful results? At AML, we partner with leading organizations to craft strategic communication and sustainability solutions to drive real business value. Let's discuss your goals and explore how our expertise can empower your success. Let's get started. Contact our team of communication and sustainability experts today to discuss your unique needs. We are confident we can craft a solution that empowers your organization's success.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all our participants joining from all around the world. I bring you warm greetings on behalf of A-Line Group. This is our webinar session for today. And this afternoon, we have a college of experts and thought leaders from four important sectors that spans from academia, the military and paramilitary. We have both from FMCG manufacturing and the evolving electric vehicle automobile space. And this afternoon, we'll be having a full discussion on climate change with Africa in perspective. This day, was designed not out of intentionally designed because tomorrow actually is the World Environment Day, which is going to be a very busy day, and we'll have clusters of engagement here and there. And so we deemed it fit as an organization to move it a day forward to really have a full and robust discussion. And I want to use this opportunity to welcome my panelists, my college of speakers and experts that will be doing justice to this discussion. I also want to thank the regulators that are amongst us, our clients, the sustainability family, and all that has one or two things to do with the environment, which I'm sure everyone is part of this. So once again, I warmly welcome you, and I just want to give you a simple advice. Please relax and there's something for everybody in this meeting this afternoon. There's something for everyone. So relax, get your pen, get your papers, use the chat box, drop your comments, suggestions, and I believe that we'll have a very robust discussion this afternoon. Thank you once again for making out time to be here with us, and have a wonderful World Environment Day. Thank you.
Our planet is sending us signals. Too wet, too dry, too hot to ignore. But listen. Listen again. Do you hear something else? Building. Growing. now at scale, now with momentum. Solutions too hot to ignore. This is the sound of change.
Protect the environment for the future generations.
The signals are clear. Now for climate.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. We just heard the welcome address by Engineer William Asimita, that is our technical director at A-Line Media. Okay, so there's an African proverb that says that when the roots of a tree begin to decay, it spreads death to the branches. And in many ways, climate change reminds us that when we neglect our environment, the consequences eventually reach every aspect of society, from our food systems to our economy to our health and security. All right, so this is why our keynote speaker is uniquely positioned to guide this conversation. Dr. Walter Okong is an environmental sustainability expert, researcher, and climate resilience advocate whose work sits at the intersection of science, policy, and real world implementation. He's the founder and chief executive officer of Wadaka Consult, where he leads initiatives focused on environmental sustainability, climate resilience, ESG integration, and responsible development practices. He's also a research fellow at the TET Fund Center of Excellence in Biodiversity Conservation and Ecosystem Management at the University of Lagos, where he leads research and policy engagement on climate resilience, environmental governance, ecosystem management, and sustainable development across Africa. What I particularly admire about Dr. Walter's work is his commitment to ensuring that research doesn't remain only on paper, but it translates into action and practical implementation. He works closely with policymakers, researchers, businesses, and communities to bridge the gap between environmental knowledge and practical implementation. He's a member of several respected international and national organizations and continues to contribute to conversations shaping sustainability, climate action, biodiversity conversation, and evidence-based environmental governance. Today, he will be speaking on Africa's call to climate action, bridging the gap between global solutions and local realities. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in filling the chat box with a warm virtual welcome to an outstanding environmental thought leader and sustainability practitioner. Dr. Walter Okong, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice after a long day of planning from the A-Lim Media Limited, which is good. So today we'll just go through the business of today and look at the topic critically. So good day, everyone. My name is Okong Walter. I'm a senior research fellow at the TET Fund Center of Excellence in Biodiversity Conservation and Ecosystem Management. So today we'll discuss why Africa must be at the center of the global climate actions. Then we'll also look at why Africa, despite contributing very little greenhouse gas emissions, it faces at least most of the severe climate impact. So this presentation will definitely explore the challenges. We'll look at the opportunities. We'll look at partnership needed to build a climate resilient Africa. Then today's presentations will be broken down probably in 7 major sections, looking at the climate crisis and its urgent action that is needed. Next, we will examine the Africa's climate challenges and vulnerabilities. Then we'll also explore the different opportunities for green growth, technology and innovation. Also, we'll look at community-led solutions that has to do with climate finance. We'll look at partnership. And finally, we'll look at the future pathways. Then we'll conclude with a call to action. So, for today, I'll be your pilot. So I want everybody to sit tight, put on your seatbelt, and let's do this together. So, the world currently, this data is, I think this is the data for last year, so we don't have the data for this year. So the world currently emits around 36 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually, and this actually comes from fossil fuel industries and the likes. And the most interesting thing about this carbon dioxide is that they are not evenly distributed. That is to say that if you look at the chart on your left-hand side, you could see that Asia as a continent contributes about 61%, 61% of the world global carbon dioxide, 61%. Then by the time you look at North America, which follows second, contributes 7%, 17%. Then you look at Europe, contribute 13% of this number. Then Africa contributes 4%. Then the South Americans also contribute 4%. Then you look at Oceania, just contribute 1%. So, and that is why you could see that for every of the manufacturer, you could see why everybody's heading to China. And you could see the level of CO2 that is being released from that carbon dioxide. But the most interesting thing about pollution is that the very fact that it's being generated in one continent, it doesn't just stay with that continent, and that's where we have transboundary pollution. So that transboundary pollution are situations where with the air currents, pollutions are being moved from one location to another, affecting both the ecosystem, including climate. So you could see this is where each of the continents stands as at today. Now let's bring this down into the different contexts. So you could see that 72,000 tons of this CO2 are being released every minute. So every minute, I know everybody in their offices, we are all using our cooling system to actually cool our systems. But this is, and that's why we need to be talking, this topic should be on the front burner on the day-to-day in our lives. In even the webinar should be something that should be done monthly, so that we could scream that there is the politicians will say you are sitting down on a keg of gunpowder. So we are in a serious mess. So we have 72,000 tons being released into the atmosphere every minute, and this enormous flow of these pollutions continue to alter our climate system. So last year we complained about heat wave around the February, March. Heat wave, some people were having skin rashes and the likes. And you could see that the temperature continued to rise, keeps on rising. And the most interesting thing is if our forest reserves today are being cut down, our forest reserve today is being cut down for real estate. You see some forest reserve in the southwestern areas, or the J4 areas that are being destroyed to do what? To real estate are buying up our forest reserve, which is very, very disheartening. And you will see that despite that you have this plant which serve as carbon sink to help us take out this carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and store it in their roots and in the soil. And despite the fact that even these states have their commissioners of environment and the likes, they even go ahead to approve such forests should be depleted further, making the temperature to rise to a certain degrees that are unbearable. So you can see that despite these numbers, a significant portion actually remains for decades after being released. And once this happens, definitely to trap it and intensify the greenhouse effects. So everything becomes so hot to a point that is unbearable. And you can see that the two sources where this pollution comes from are the fossil fuel, because we all need energy for our work, for our jobs, in our homes. Energy is an important commodity. And you could see that both the fossil fuel and the cement emissions were projected last year to reach approximately 38.1 billion tons of carbon dioxide that was released. And this is a report from the Global Carbon Project in 2025. So you can see that there is this imbalance, which actually raises important questions about climate justice, because those who contribute the least are often the most affected. So despite the fact that the Asia contributes the most, you could see that we contribute less, 4%. Despite our 4%, we are even more affected due to transboundary pollution. Now let's look at Africa. So you can see that, so what happens despite our 4%? So what happened is that in the Sahel and other parts of Africa, we currently experience different vulnerability because our sectors are vulnerable. We look at the agricultural sector, when you look at water resources, you look at our public health, you look at our social economic stability, all these sectors are actually affected as a result of climate change. And the most interesting part is we have climate change on one hand affecting our ecosystem in Africa. Then you have insecurity on the other hand, actually aggravating and making sure that the impact increases to an unbearable level. So you have two things we are currently facing two things in Africa. One, the insecurity, and the other one, the climate impact. So you could see that with 355 million households are currently exposed to these climate hazards. This is from the World Bank 2022. And the most interesting thing is 40% actually reside in these conflict-prone areas. And therefore, there is this urgent need that we need to put in place to actually integrate adaptation strategies that tends to combine traditional wisdom with modern innovation. So we could see traditional wisdom. So every community have to do what? Bring out a community-led solution for their community. So communities are tired of we importing modern innovations, which is not sustainable. So it has to be a community-led approach. So you could see that if you look at the Horn of Africans, looking at Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya, and these three countries, because I've been there and I was actually experienced this problem, they face this prolonged drought. And what happens is that where one country in the southwest or in the West African, we are battling with droughts. In the Eastern Africa, we are battling with flood, sorry, and the East African, they are battling with drought. So a drought, which actually cause severe shortages for their livestock, including their plants. You will see a lot of their cows and cattle fall down on the ground because of lack of water, and they die off. And that's why you could see this migration from the Eastern Africa when this cattle areas tends to migrate because of the loss in their livestock. So they tend to migrate, and this is what is actually fueling insecurity, where people want to move from a region that is heavily impacted by climate change. They try to move down south, and that is what is infiltrating the whole of the insecurity in the Sahel and even in the West African. So you could see that if you look at the countries that are affected by flood, you could see that even Nigeria is not left out. You look at Mozambique, you look at South Sudan, you look at Libya, and the flood doesn't just come. We know the effects. They destroy our homes, they destroy infrastructures, and even the most interesting thing, when flood comes, it moves along aquatic animals. They tend to bring aquatic animals closer to our doorsteps. So, and when the flood is actually receding back, the animals remain. And that's why most times you see pockets of snakes here and there in our roofs, in our septic tanks and the likes. And also across the Sahel and even the Western African regions, we also experience heat wave, which are increasing. They tends to increase even desertifications, and the heat wave tends to bring into our doorstep health risks. Because we have health risks. I know in Nigeria back last year, a lot of people were complaining of skin reactions due to the heat wave. A lot of people have to take their bed 3 times in the night. A lot of people in the northern region part, someone was telling me that he has to soak this bed in water, and by the time he wakes up in the next morning, the bed is already dried. So I was like, wow. So this problem is here with us. Now let's look at the Horn of Africa. This chart is actually showing we are looking at persistent droughts. How persistent drought tends to increase food insecurity, and this is a report from 2022. So if you look at the Horn of Africa, if you look at your far left, take Ethiopia as an example. Ethiopia actually experienced 4.8 million acute malnourished children, and of whom 2.5 million actually live in the drought affected areas. So if you have 2.5 living in drought affected areas, and you will see the impact in that particular country, and you could see that even in that particular country in 2022, they actually estimated 4 million livestock, which actually died in the cost of this problem. And over 590,000 people were internally displaced by drought from January to December. So you could see a situation where, due to flooding, people tend to migrate to safer lands. Also, during drought, the cattle rearers and other farmers, they tend to migrate to other locations. So you could see that the problem is not just in Nigeria. Also, when you look at Kenya too also suffers the same thing. For Kenya, you have 942,000 children actually suffering from acute malnourished in drought-affected areas for 2022. Then if you look at even for their livestock, they also experienced 2.5 million deaths relating to their livestock. And you could see that it even moved even to Somalia. The same thing, 1.8 million children were affected, 3 million livestock was lost, and over 1 million people were internally displaced. So you could see that this problem is persistent across board. So no country is spared. So it's just that the degree tends to differ. So you could see, if you look at the charts, if you look at the different coloration code, if you look at phase 1, which shows minima, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, they are facing minima. If you look at phase 2, the color code shows regions that are stressed. If you look at phase 3, you see crisis prone regions as a result of insecurity. Then if you look at the regions with the darker colors, so those areas are actually there's farming in those areas. In part of the Mogadishu, they are experiencing farming, and all these areas, Somalia and the likes, they are having a crisis, insecurity. And the most interesting thing, for every country, there's something wrong with the northern part of the country. If you go to Kenya, the northern part of Kenya, they have terrorists. If you go to Somalia, the northern part, there's terrorists. If you go every country, their northern part, there's problem, including Nigeria. So in Nigeria too, we have the bulk of our terrorists in the northern region, the same across board, which is very, very interesting. Now let's look at the ongoing drought conditions. So you look at for this figure, we'll be looking at the vegetation stress. We are going to look at the heat wave duration. Then we are going to look at the long-term drought. So this is from January 2024 to December 2025. The first picture on your far left is talking about the vegetation stress. You could see that looking at the color charts, you could look at the vegetation stress across the Mogadishu also remains the same to show that it's lower than normal. Then you could see the whitish parts are near normal. You could see when you go down, the only place that we have little normalcy is around Addis Ababa and the Lex, which is more or less their capital city. The same thing with the heat wave, and the same thing with the drought. The same thing. So you can see that the dark coloration showing red shows extremely dry conditions. extremely dry conditions for both Ethiopia, you look at Kenya, look at Somalia. The three nations are the worst hit, extremely dry from January 2024 and December 2025. So this area experienced extremely dry conditions, which is not too good for their vegetations and as well as their livestock. Now let's also look at the flood. Let's look at flood. This figure actually shows looking at the spatial distributions that has to do with, so we are looking at the total flood event, which has to do with the A. Then for B, we are looking at the total deaths incurred in the African continent. Then we look at total affected people. Then D has to do with the total damage being experienced from 1927 to 2020. Now, the most interesting thing is, let's take our beloved country, Nigeria, as an example. You look at for Nigeria, the total flood that has actually occurred, not rainfall, the total flood event, so has been placed within 32 to 45. No, has been placed between 46 to 57 for this duration. When you look at the number of total deaths, the total deaths recorded has been 2,926 to 882 deaths. When you look at the total affected people, 12,669 to 87,845 people have been affected. Then the total damages stood at 1,168 to 3,462. So this is from 1927. These are the data available from 1927 to 2020 across the different countries in Africa. Now, let's move to the rising food and water insecurity. Let's look at the implications, what the effects of this climate change tends to. So let's look at, so as we all know that climate change tends to threaten food production and water supply across Africa, which is true. And the most interesting thing is that in the Sahel region, Mali, Niger, Chad, they are actually experiencing droughts and land degradations, which has actually affected their crop yield and also their grazing land. In Nigeria and Ghana, we are also facing irregular rainfall and flooding, which over the years has affected our staple crops, such as the maize and the rice. And in the Lake Chad Basin, there's also water scarcity, which is also worsening the crisis there due to the shrinkage of the water body and also the climate stress around that regions. Also, millions across the Eastern and Southern Africa are actually facing hunger and limited access to drinking water. So there's problem everywhere. Now, these particular figures is actually showing the drivers of these problems. If you look at our continent, Africa, the countries that are red with black stripe are the countries that are currently experiencing different forms of insecurity. So when you look at why are we facing the different forms of insecurity, when you look at Burkina Faso, they are actually in a war with a different rebel group. The same thing with Mali, the same thing with Niger, the same thing with Chad. Nigeria is surrounded by Chad, Niger, and Cameroon, and our borders are too porous, and there's infiltrations of the different group crossing the borders at will. So what it means is For Nigeria to have peace, Niger must be at peace, Chad must be at peace, and Cameroon must also be at peace. So if the border countries around you are not in peace, definitely you are in trouble. So all the countries that surround Nigeria are currently facing one rebel group or the other. When you look at the DRC, you look at Burundi, you look at South Sudan, you look at Sudan, you look at Somalia, you look at Burundi, you look at DRC, all these countries are experiencing conflicts. They're experiencing conflicts. And this conflict don't just stop at probably it has to do with like what Nigeria is facing, kidnapping and the likes. This also affects food. This also affects food, which actually brings about food insecurity. So until when these regions are at peace, and that is where we start to experience some level of what we live. So apart from the climate change and its impact, conflict is also another interesting drivers of this problem. So let's look at the acute food insecurity in Africa by regions. So you could see that in 2024, Central Africa, East Africa experienced I think this one has to do with, I think 45 million people were affected in the East African. Then in the Southern African, they only have experienced around 20 million people was affected. But in West Africa, where Nigeria is situated, you could see the chart for yourself. You could see the chart for yourself. Now, let's look at countries with the largest percentage increase in acute food insecurity over the years. So for this one, you could see that Sudan actually topped the charts with 5.3 million people, followed by Nigeria with 6.8 million. And that is why the government was able, when the inflation on food was so high, the government quickly started importing food, which actually crashed the price of commodity. Also, you have sorry. So let's move on because of time. All right. So let's look at the rising food. I'll just summarize here in context. So you can see that Africa overall, 163 million Africans is actually facing this acute food insecurity. And the conflict and climate disasters are the major drivers. And the most interestingly, the most affected countries is Nigeria when it comes to the rising food and water insecurity, Sudan and the DRC. And the 6 Southern Africans which actually faces this drought are the Zambian, Malawi, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Lesotho are currently facing a shortfall in their staple crops. So the question is, why Africa, despite our 4%? So the reason is because African economy depend heavily on the climate sensitive sectors. Because of our huge population, we must eat. And for us to eat, our agricultural sector needs to thrive, our fishery needs to thrive, our ecosystem service looking at the natural resources need to thrive, increasing vulnerability to climate change is there. Also, weak infrastructure, conflicts, limited climate finance, low adaptive capacity. These tends to drive and intensify climate risks across our continents. So despite these challenges, Africa has the world's youngest populations with over 60% under the age of 25. So what are we going to do with our youthful populations? So this set of people need to drive the climate advocacy. They need to drive the green entrepreneurship. They need to drive renewable energy innovations and environmental conservation. And there must be investment in education, green jobs, digital innovations, which will transform Africa youth into a major force for climate resilience and sustainable development. So Africa, to me, Africa is key to global climate success because we actually hold vast natural resources which are essential for global climate mitigations and biodiversity conservations. When you look at the Congo basins in the DRC, is actually the world's largest rainforest for major global carbon sink. And also, Africa definitely we tends to possess enormous renewable energy potential, which has to do with solar. We have enormous solar in the northern part, even in Nigeria and other African countries. We have wind, hydro, geothermal resources, particularly in the Kenya, South Africa, countries across the Sahara regions. Then we have sustainable land management and conservation efforts in Africa are definitely critical in achieving these global climate goals. But this global climate success definitely will depend on one, investment, technology transfer. We need to build capacity, partnership that supports African low carbon development pathway. Now let's look at the important sector where we have advantage over, which has to do with energy and renewable potential. More than 600 million Africans lack access to electricity, limiting climate resilience and adaptive capacity. So you ask yourself, with the enormous sunlight, why are we in darkness? Why? So Africa holds approximately 60% of this world-based resources, that despite the fact that we have huge amount of sunlight, we only account for about 1% to 2% of the global solar generation capacity. Despite we have this sunlight, we are only able to do a tap only 2% from that number, and we remain in darkness. So Africa attracts only about 2% of this global energy investment, despite its huge renewable energy opportunities. And as at last year, 2025, our installed capacity from renewable energy stood at 4,500 megawatts, which actually represents about 54% from the previous year. In achieving this universal energy access in Africa, Africa requires $25 billion annually in investment to be able to achieve its goal in energy and renewable energy. Now, if you look at last year, 2025, South Africa came first with the solar capacity additions, looking at 1,600. Nigeria came second with 800 megawatts. Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Zambia, Botswana, and down. So we, with our enormous sunlight, we need to do more. And that's why I was not surprised when I see the Aso Rock being switched into what? Renewable energy. So the president is telling you, if you like, don't switch. So let's look at the key challenges. First is the finance gap. Renewable energy is not cheap. It requires funding. So limited access to climate finance and green investment tends to slow down adaptation and sustainable development efforts in Africa. When you look at the infrastructure deficits, also, there's increased vulnerability to flood, droughts, heat waves, and other climate-related disasters. In the northern regions during the rainy seasons, you will hear that the bridge is being carried away by flood. I think it happened last year, and such a bridge has to be replaced. Then we look at weak policy enforcement. Poor implementation and monitoring tends to reduce the effectiveness of these environmental policies. And the last has to do with insufficient climate and environmental data. The problem with Africa and the problem with Nigeria is that we lack data. And because we lack data, the Western world is going to tell our story. If you don't tell your story yourself, the Western world is going to tell it for you. And you'll be surprised by the time they start turning out data, you'll be asking yourself, where do they get the data from? So we need to bridge the gap between the availability of data Now let's look at the opportunities we have. So you hear the popular phrase that if you are given lemon, make lemonade. So let's look at, despite this problem, what can we do? So let's look at the opportunity sectors that is available to us. When you look at the renewable energy, this sector alone could create 4 million jobs by 2030 across the different regions in Africa. When you look at solar mini grids, we look at wind farms, you look at the hydropower, these could reduce our unemployed population. Looking at sustainable agriculture, we need to have a smart, climate smart agriculture, which has to do with, since the different areas are experiencing droughts, we need to switch to the different smart agriculture, looking at the hydroponics, looking at the different smart agriculture. And this sector definitely will also generate 50 million jobs by 2030. This is just to do away with the drought. And also we need to actually have some research relating to drought-resistant seedlings, which we are already doing at the University of Lagos, to actually have drought-resistant seedlings that will withstand the drought in these regions. Then also looking at waste management. In Africa, in West Africa, where Nigeria is domiciled, waste is a problem. But what do we do with the waste? Can waste be converted to energy apart from the normal materials? We know a lot of people are converting it to shoes, to bag, to clothes, and the likes. But the issue is, can waste be converted to energy? And this is already been done by Lafarge, Nigeria peers, and that's why I put the logo. So Lafarge is currently powering his operations 50% from waste. So you could see that they take this waste from the Olosusun dump site, which they use. So they are trying to increase their capacity to 75% this year, strictly from waste. So you look at also green constructions, which has to do with green building, sustainable materials, and the likes. So we need to start designing our schools and hospitals to be eco-friendly. So you see a situation where the interior of the hospitals, the windows look so small, the windows is small, then you put a glass that divides the window that is so small into two parts. So one part is blocked by the glass, the other, so you don't have, it's not well ventilated. So when the energy is out, what happens? There's heat. And that's why we need to start designing an eco-friendly buildings that are green, with even sustainable materials that could withstand over time, that could serve us with or without energy. Also, we also need to have our community-led solutions. The community-led solutions is where Nigeria and other West African countries are actually having issues with, because in Nigeria, the governments and other NGOs, and these were the NGOs, they, oh, we've planted 5,000 trees, 10,000 trees. When you look at the different portals of NGOs, you are amazed with the number of trees they've reported to have planted over the years. The government will say, oh, this year is the tree planting day, and we have planted 8,000 trees. So by the time you drive around Lagos, you can't find those trees. And that is because it has to be a community-led approach. Community must be at the front end. Community must lead the approach. And a good example is last month, you could see the government was environmental sanitation, good approach. But ask yourself a question: do people actually came out from their houses to clean their houses, or did people actually stayed back home and wait for 8:30 to leave the house? So it has to be a community-led approach. Each community has to be in the forefront. So definitely, for us to be out of this wood, there's need for communities need to plant trees and also restore their forest. I've actually talked about the climate smart agriculture. Then we need to have community waste management and recycling. This has to be from the bottom up approach, not from the up down. So it has to be from the bottom. We have tried from the up down approach and it has not worked. So we need to reverse it. It has to be from our homes down to the national. And there must be a local early warning and disaster preparedness. In the past, you hear that the dam in Cameroon, I can't remember the name now, they released the water, and because of that singular act, different farmlands were destroyed in the northern parts, crops. So these are what we need. We need the early warning system. The early warning system has to be in place, and each community has to be enlightened about what the early warning system means, because information is actually key. Then you look at renewable energy cooperative. So the community these days, when I went to Kenya, it was interesting. I see community-led approach where the transparent roofs were used instead of the opaque roof. This just to have a little lightning to the classes into the classes during their lecture time. We see torchlights that has been built by the community members. They have torchlights that they use. They light up their street, they light up their communities, small solar panels, little innovations, but great impacts. Also, we need to have the Youth Women-led Environmental Initiative. And this Youth Women-led Environmental Initiative is, if you want things to work, it has to be in the hands of the youth and the women. Women have their action, they play critical roles when you are about to get anything done. And that is why women have to lead this approach. And you look at the most interesting thing, most of the trees planted, I could tell you sincerely that 50% of these trees are planted by women, because I'm always on the field. Most of the volunteers are women. It is rare for you to see a male volunteer. Every man is looking for money. So youth and women are doing a great job. And for anything to work, it has to be local adaptation practices, plus indigenous knowledge, plus grassroots resilience. So these are the three that must be considered when drafting any community-led solutions. Now let's look at technology and innovations. So for technology and innovations, we need to, AI has come to stay whether we like it or not. So definitely we need to use it to monitor in real time, to monitor our environment, looking at this smart agricultural tools, AI automation system for planting, which has been done in several African universities. Then we look at electric vehicles and green transportations. But in Nigeria, it is very, in Nigeria, our electric vehicles, imagine somebody putting on his generator to charge his electric vehicle. So you put on your generator, and your generator is releasing carbon monoxide into the environment, and you are charging your vehicle. Then, so it's very funny. So we might not really achieve this outrightly, but gradually, for any economy to thrive, our electricity must be stable, at least 70%. So I've talked about the green building technology, smart grids, energy storage, and this is being done in rural areas. I think we have the Rural Electrification Agency by the government. They are doing interesting, great jobs. Different communities are on we have solar farms across everywhere. The president of Nigeria was able to sign that bill into law and is gradually making progress. I'm not speaking for the government, but because I travel around and I see that we have a lot of solar farms springing up in the southwestern, springing up in the northern part, even springing up in the southeastern regions, where a lot of key players in that sectors are actually building solar farms, supplying electricity to communities, which is a great idea. Everybody doesn't need to be on the power grid. And we also have the climate monitoring satellites, which helps us to monitor. But I think for Nigeria, okay, our satellite is up, but previous years it was down. Then we have the Internet of Things, which helps us to monitor the climate in real time. Then we have biological technology, climate resilient crops. Then we have the waste to energy technology, which I've already talked about. Then we have the desalination and water recycling technology, and this has to do with, imagine we in University of Lagos, we are surrounded by the lagoon and the water is salty. So, and the most interesting thing, do we have fresh water? Some parts we do, some parts we don't. So we need technologies in this regard. Now, what is the role of the private sector? What must the private sector do with regards to green investments? So the private sector, one, there must be deliberate support when it comes to investment regarding solar, wind, mini grid projects across Africa. So we need more funding in this regard. And also, we need to support and also promote businesses that are actually, their jobs is actually around the sustainable supply chains and climate friendly products. Then when you look at climate entrepreneurship, which has to do with green startups, and therefore we need to support the young minds and the climate entrepreneurs, they are actually gradually, they are driving innovations, and this has further helped Nigeria with regards to job creations. So we need to have a kind of a PPP arrangement, which will definitely attract this climate finance and actually reduce investment risks. And also our corporate social responsibility, we need to actually turn out different initiatives like what our host is doing today. We need to turn out the initiative to support environmental conservation, skills development, and community resilience. And the problem we have is that a lot of companies are actually looking for the CSR for them to do. But if you want to, if as a company you want to actually do any meaningful CSR, you can reach out to the University of Lagos. We have a lot of projects on ground, and we could easily tell you the one that actually fits your budget. Now, let's look at the government policy and framework and the institutional support. So for the government, we need to have the national climate policy and plan. And in Nigeria, we have so many of these policies, so many of these plans, but the implementation is what is the problem. So government must develop climate policies and renewable energy targets, which has to align with the Paris Agreement. Then when you look at the regulatory framework, we need strong regulations that tends to support clean energy, environmental protection, and sustainable infrastructure. Then also, when you look at public investment and infrastructure, there's need for us to improve resilience, infrastructure, transport systems, and early warning systems. Then we must have an institutional coordination that will definitely strengthen climate planning across sectors and regions. Also, the major thing is capacity building. For us to be able to achieve all this, we must build capacity. There must be research. The government must, in all African countries, must put a certain amount of money for research. A country who do not research, definitely there'll be heavy importer of what? Of innovations. So if you don't research locally, you will definitely import innovations from outside, and this will affect your what? It will increase the unemployment. So there must be technology transfer to enhance climate adaptation and management. Then when you look at the next one is partnership and multi-stakeholder collaborations. So there must be partnership. And you look at the actual phrases, if you want to go far, they say, if you want to go far, they say go alone. But if you want to go very far, they say, okay, do what? There's need for partnership. So we need to have partnership across board. So we have the regional organizations, such as the ECOWAS, the SAID, the AU supports, coordinating the different regions. And we need to have, the African countries need to work with Global Climate Alliance to secure climate finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. Then also, the civil society groups are not left out. There's need for us to engage them because we have more of them in different regions. They will definitely promote the climate justice, community adaptations, and grassroots participation. Then we need to invest heavily in research and academic partnership. Universities are not left out. Most interestingly, the university has all the solutions to all the problems in the private sector, but these are not being taxed. Only few companies who actually engage the university. This is our problem, and we need solutions with regards to this part. And we have the donor coordination. So donors and developing banks definitely coordinate funds to improve the effectiveness of the climate finance delivery, and that's why partnership is an essential commodity. Now let's look at case study, countries that have done well. When you look at proven climate action models. So you see Kenya, they have their early warning systems actually uses data and community network to reduce droughts related losses by 30%. So these are early warning systems. Look at Morocco, their Noah solar complex actually generates 580 megawatts of clean energy. That tends to support large-scale job creation. This is what they've done in the past. You look at Ethiopia, interestingly, they've actually planted 6 billion trees to combat desertification and support livelihoods. This is the kind of bold initiative that Nigeria needs to take. Look at Nigeria. Also, our solar home systems expand rural electricity access, which is actually creating green jobs for local technicians. So that particular agency of government, the Rural Electrification Agency, and other new players in that sector, they're actually doing great jobs. When you look at Mozambique, they have this community-based early warning system, like what you have in Kenya, that helps to do what? Forecast to reduce flood impacts. So the question is, let's look at the climate finance and mechanisms and resource mobilizations. So the question is, how much do we really need to combat our problems? So look at the international public finance. It's been put around 50 to 100 billion. And this will actually do what? Scale slowly or short of targets. So the key beneficiaries are usually the government vulnerable populations. Looking at the private investment with policy support, we have also $50 billion emerging renewable energy sectors. We also have the green bonds, you have the domestic resource mobilizations, you have the carbon market, which has to do with the early stage, requires framework developments. And the key beneficiaries in this sector is usually conservation projects, which has to do with the forest reserve, forest restorations. Then you look at the climate insurance and risk transfers, and this has to do with vulnerable sectors. Then you look at the multilateral development bank loans, which would definitely increase infrastructure projects as well as national budgets. And before we can have anything sustainable, there must be accountability. And that's why our accountability mechanisms and results monitoring need to be intact. And therefore, we need to have the climate information systems in which government in different regions has to create an integrated climate information systems. And these systems are to track emissions, adaptation actions, and climate finance. Also, every country needs to have the satellite monitoring and remote sensing, which tends to monitor their forest reserves, their land use, infrastructure, and environmental change. Also, we need to have the community-based monitoring, which will definitely ensures local participation in tracking project outcomes and impacts. Then we have the international reporting standards, which most companies are doing. Then we have the result-based finance, which has to link funds to verify climate actions outcomes, and as well as performance. So there's need for us to measure before and after. Now let's look at the future vision and long-term pathway. So the question is, the truth is, Africa can actually achieve a net zero or net negative emissions by 2050 with our enormous sunlight. Africa does not have any business to be in the dark. Also, we can only achieve this if we tap into our youth as our youthful populations. That is, a strong youth and innovation ecosystem will definitely drive global leadership in climate technology and entrepreneurship. And also, we need to improve governance, which will strengthen transparency, accountability, and inclusive decision-making in climate actions. Also, when you look at the global partnership and climate justice, most support Africa through the climate finance, technology transfer, and fair climate justice commitments. Call to action and implementation. So, the international community must scale up climate finance to Africa from $26 billion to $100 billion annually. And this is just to fulfill the COP commitments and prioritize grants over loans for vulnerable countries. So we are tired of loans. Give us grants. The reason is because we only impact just 4%. So we need grants and not loans. Two, when you look at the African government leadership, so every of our governments from different countries must strengthen climate policies, set binding emissions, renewable energy targets, and also integrate climate actions into national development plans. So before a president presents the budget, he must ensure that this budget is environmental friendly. That is, it takes care of the environment. Also, with regards to the private sector mobilization, there's need for us to expand investment in renewable energy while ensuring fair and responsible practices. And each communities must be empowered to lead local adaptation efforts, participate in decision-making, and integrate indigenous knowledge with scientific solutions. So it has to be a community-led approach. You don't bring the approach to the community to implement, and that is why all our policies have not been working. So the policies are foreign. The communities are finding it very difficult to implement it. So the community, each of our experts has to sit down with the community to design an approach that will solve the problem rather than proposing, introducing, or coercing them to do what? To follow suit with what you have for them. So in conclusion, Africa is both highly vulnerable to climate change and are uniquely positioned to contribute to the global climate solutions. So the continent's renewable energy potential, natural ecosystem, innovation capacity, and youthful population tends to provide enormous opportunities. Therefore, bridging the global climate ambitions with local realities will be the key to building a sustainable and resilient future for Africa. So the quote, it says, Africa is not merely a victim of climate change. It is a vital part of the solution. By investing in people, innovations, and partnership today, we can build a resilient, prosperous, and a climate-smart African for generations to come. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walter, for that enlightening session. Thank you so, so much. That session was free, but honestly, it could have been a masterclass. It was so impactful, so knowledge filled. And one thing that stands out clearly from that session is that across Africa, people who have contributed the least global emissions we are now facing some of the biggest consequences because, like you said, carbon emissions, they don't stay in one place. They don't need a visa to travel. From flooding in Lagos and Bayelsa to droughts affecting farmers in northern Nigeria, rising temperatures across our cities, unpredictable rainfall patterns, all of that. It is happening. That's climate change. Climate change is happening in our farms, in our markets, it's happening in our cities, it's happening in our wallets, our communities. And we can see the results of all of it. So, thank you so much once again, Dr. Walter, for that. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. So now we'll be moving on to the panel session, and I'll be introducing the panelists for today. first panelist I will be introducing is Rear Admiral D. Franklin Matthew, retired. Ladies and gentlemen, our next panelist brings a unique and a highly valuable perspective at this point in the maritime operations, national security, and strategic leadership. Retired Rear Admiral D. Franklin Matthew is a distinguished maritime affairs professional with over 33 years of leadership experience spanning maritime security, defense operations, logistics, and strategic training. Over the course of his career in the Nigerian Navy and Defense Headquarters, he has served in several senior leadership roles, including Director of Training, Director of Procurement, and Command Operations Officer for Operation AWATSE. He has also led multinational maritime exercises and has represented Nigeria in the United Nations peacekeeping missions in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, and in the Democratic Republic of Congo, bringing a truly global dimension to his operational experience. In his pursuit of continuous knowledge and learning and excellence, he has furthered his education at the World Maritime University in Sweden and the Harvard Business School, strengthening his insights in maritime safety, leadership development, and operational innovation. Today, he continues to provide advisory and executive leadership within Nigeria's maritime and offshore sectors, contributing to efforts that strengthen safety, security, and sustainability in our maritime environment. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome Rear Admiral D. Franklin Matthew. We are very privileged to have you with us. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to be with you today. And I sincerely want to commend Dr. Walter for this very insightful presentation on climate change and its effects in Africa. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Mr. Williams for Airline for giving me the opportunity to contribute my thoughts on this all-important subject of climate change.
All right, thank you so much for that, sir. Our next panelist we'll be introducing is Amoni Solomon. He is someone who works at the heart of environmental compliance, sustainability implementation, and ESG performance. Amoni Solomon is an environmental and sustainability professional with extensive experience supporting sustainability initiatives across oil and gas and industrial project environments. His work spans environmental compliance, stakeholder engagement, grievance management, ESG reporting, HSE management, sustainability coordination, environmental monitoring, contractor management, and regulatory compliance. What stands out about Amoni's journey is his passion for promoting sustainable operations and helping organizations continuously improve their environmental performance while balancing business realities. We're excited to have you here. Welcome, Amoni. We are delighted to have you with us. You could give a quick thank you or shout out.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me on this section. Thank you to the keynote speaker, the Dr. Walter, to ALAMS and the management for putting up these sections, to other panelists and to other invitees on this section. It's great to have all of us here to share our thoughts, to fine-tune and put up an actions towards a common goal, which is climate change management and our individual. Hello, confirm you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Sorry for the little pause. There was a glitch in the internet. Okay, thank you so much for that, sir. I will be introducing next Annabelle Umetok. She is our third panelist, and she's a sustainability strategist who has helped organizations move from sustainability ambition to sustainability action. She is a sustainability professional with experience spanning both the manufacturing and financial sectors. She's a trained environmental manager certified in ISO 26000 and ISO 14001 standards. And she is a member of the Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria. Her work includes developing sustainability strategies, sustainability audits, decarbonization roadmaps, waste management systems, afforestation projects, social impact initiatives, and sustainability reporting using globally recognized standards. One statement from her professional philosophy that particularly resonates with today's conversation is sustainability is a journey. It is not a one size fits all exercise. And I believe that perspective would add tremendous value to today's discussion. Welcome, Annabelle.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. And finally, our panel moderator, Rachel Iloba. Rachel Iloba is a sustainability and ESG professional whose experience cuts across several sectors, including oil and gas, telecommunications, and the non-profit space. Rachel Iloba has worked extensively in ESG consulting, supporting organizations in environmental and social impact assessments, stakeholder engagement, sustainability reporting, ESG implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. She has helped organizations align with globally recognized standards, including the GRI, IFC Performance Standards, IFIRS, Sustainability Standards, ISO 14001, and ISO 26000. Beyond consulting, she contributes to research, to content development, and knowledge sharing initiatives while currently pursuing a master's degree in environmental sustainability and policy at the University of Lagos. Rachel brings a valuable perspective on how organizations can move beyond compliance and create meaningful sustainability impact. Welcome, Rachel. The floor is
Thank you, Amy, for that introduction. Thank you, Dr. Walter, for that keynote speech. It was very, very insightful and educative. I'm sure our audience today must have learned a lot about climate change and the need for each and every one of us to participate actively, because climate change is not, some people say it's not real, but the truth is that it affects each and every one of us, whether we like it or not, whether you believe it or not. Climate change is here, it's affecting everyone, and we all have to ensure that we try our best for this to mitigate the adverse effects of climate change. Thank you, Dr. Water, and I also want to welcome our panelists. Welcome, Admiral. Good afternoon, sir. Mr. Amoni, good afternoon.
Good
Annabelle, good
afternoon.
afternoon. Thank you all for joining the session, and
Good
also a
afternoon.
shout out to our active audience. Thank you very much. We are privileged to have everyone on this call. Quickly, we'll go to the panel session, and then we'll be talking about climate change, the impacts of climate change, its adverse, which um, ranges from rising temperature, more frequent floods and droughts, sea level rise, food insecurity, biodiversity loss, public health challenges, and the likes. Now, I'd like to ask some questions. First, Admiral, I'd like to ask Dr. Water, please, you'll be joining this section. Sorry, we didn't mention earlier on. Dr. Water, you'll be joining the panel section. I know you've really elaborated on the topic, and the theme for this panel session is bridging the gap from climate commitment to local action in Africa. I know you've mentioned some of the action points which Africa should imbibe, but we still have to continue with this session because some persons need to really get this knowledge. This message needs to be drive down to the needed people, and I think everyone here it's a stakeholder, and after this session we should be able to do our campaign to enlighten others on the need
for us to protect our climate. Admiral, I would like to ask you a question. So, climate change today is increasingly being recognized not just as an environmental issue, but also a security concern. Yes, and from Dr. Waters' um, session, we've seen some of these concerns. This is evident in our sea level rise, which I've mentioned before, extreme weather events, resource scarcity, and the displacement of communities, which are potential to create new vulnerabilities and exacerbate existing security challenge. So my question is, from a security and operational perspective, how would you describe the impact of climate change on coastal and national security in Africa? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Walter did a very good job on elaborating some of the effects of climate change. And basically, climate change is a threat multiplier. So you've talked about sea level rise, coastal erosion, storm surges. These are actually the manifestations of climate change. And if we look at how this affects the coastal areas, we should know that Africa has 38 countries along the coast, including a small island developing states. So nobody's exempted from the effects of climate change. And all these sea level rise, as a result of the wave action, they lead to serious flooding and including submerging some communities. The other day I was watching a BBC report about a town, I think Fuveme or something like that in Ghana. As at 2011 or so, thereabout, they already started witnessing the sea level rise in the community. Then after some time, they noticed that most of the community was submerged and people were actually displaced. And I was just likening it to what happened in Bayelsa in my city in 2022, when over 70% of the population were affected by the excessive water rainfall and the release of water from the Lagdo Dam. My father was alive at that time, and when I called, they said his house was overwhelmed with flood and everything. So I had to call the Navy unit. They assisted my father in taking him to Port Harcourt. That was even before the road between Yenagua and Port Harcourt actually cut. So when that happened, people could not really escape, and there was massive displacement. People lost a lot of properties, people lost their livelihoods and all that. So if we're looking at the effect of this climate change as a threat multiplier on the coastal areas, then we'll now translate it to national security. Now, national security is not all about traditional military defense. It encompasses cyber security and human security. And now we have 7 dimensions of human security. We have economic security, personal security, food security, health security, environmental security, political security, and community security. I mentioned economic security. So looking at Dr. Walter's presentation, you could see how people were displaced from their communities. And when people are displaced, they tend to move to other areas. And when they go to other areas, there is somehow resource competition. And that also leads to conflict. And even one of the effects of climate change, that's the flooding or whatever, is saltwater intrusion. Now, people don't really see that because it's not really physical, because most of we just see flooding and people are displaced. But saltwater intrusion is a very key aspect of climate change impact, as in it comes to pollute the fresh water, the aquifers in mostly the Niger Delta region. And most of these people depend on this water for their daily living and all that. I remember recently the Nigerian Navy, we did a project in my community. We were able to reactivate a water project that was abandoned since 1984. So we revived it. And the community was so happy that bringing this water project to them was going to alleviate the challenges of flooding, because when there's flooding, during the time of flooding, it pollutes the water, brackish water turns salty and everything. So they are not able to use the water for their livelihood. So I've just given examples of how this climate change impact will affect the national security and human security, because human security is people-centered. So we should look at it from the point of economic loss, health, where people's health are affected. He talked about malnutrition in some other areas, so that has to do with health. They were talking about environmental degradation. When it affects seawater comes in and there's erosion, it actually submerges, so you don't have anywhere to stay. So it affects your mental health. Just look at, for instance, there's flooding even in the city. You can't even go out. You can't go to work. You can't go to school. You can't go to hospital. So basically, national security, human security is affected by climate change threats. Thank you very much.
Admiral, that's so from your perspective, we've understood that climate change affects economics, result to economic loss, malnutrition, environmental degradation, and so on. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask Annabelle my next question. Annabelle, so much of climate conversation tends to focus on renewable energy and
Okay.
transportation. Can you hear me,
Mhm.
please?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so much of climate conversations these days tend to focus more on renewable energy and
Yeah,
transportation. Yet there are sectors like cement, the steel, and other heavy industries that are significantly or more difficult to decarbonize due to their production processes and energy intensity. I would
yeah.
like to ask, many climate discussions, okay, I said it's focused on renewable energy and transportation, but less attention is given to hard to abate sectors like the cement
Yeah.
industry.
Mhm.
So, in your perspective, what innovations or investments do you believe are most critical for reducing the sector's environmental footprint?
Okay, so first of all, I would like to start by saying that Africa is in a very interesting position. And if you really listened to Dr. Walter, he kind of explained the intersection that we are in. We are underdeveloped, and there is an opportunity for us to actually learn from the mistake of, the West and, do things right. So, in as much as our emissions currently are, would I say, minimal compared to Asia and Europe and Northern America. This is an opportunity for us, to get it right, because we cannot pause development because of climate change. We honestly cannot afford to do that. Um, so for industries, speaking as someone who currently works in the cement manufacturing sector, there are so many opportunities to decarbonize. One opportunity that has been explored, or rather, what has been explored was Dr. Walter spoke to it. But I'd also like to point out that it's not only Lafarge that is using converting waste into energy. So as Africans, we deal with waste, a problem of waste management. We are not properly managing what we produce as waste, and you get to see how it, impacts flooding. You get to see how people, are dealing with diseases in rural communities just because of improper waste management. And all of these things could actually be channeled to energy. So it now becomes a two-pronged approach. You are generating energy for your industrial needs, and then while generating energy, you are also meeting your manufacturing needs. And we know how important manufacturing is to us because, we need to create jobs, improve the economic livelihoods of us as Africans. So that is one way, converting waste to alternative sources of energy, especially in an energy intensive sector like cement manufacturing. Another one is clinker reduction. So for those who do not understand what clinker is, cement is made by heating up limestone and other materials to form clinker. That clinker is now grinded with limestone again and some other supplementary materials to make what you know as cement. Now, making that clinker is what gives off the most CO2. And it's not necessarily because you have to heat it up. It's basically because you have to break the carbon bond in the limestone for it to form clinker. So that is what gives off the majority of the CO2. Now, if you were to typically make cement, let's say you'd be doing like an 80% clinker to, supplementary materials mix. But if you are able to make cement using less than 80%, so let's say 50%, between 30 to 50% clinker, and then, supplementing with, calcined clay and other supplementary materials, that significantly gives you more cement with less clinker, meaning that your absolute CO2 emissions reduce. Apologies if I'm being too technical. Another technology that we could look at is carbon capture and utilization. That is something that is being explored in, the Western Hemisphere or in the Western countries, and it has been, seen to be a viable technology or a viable action, that industries can commit to help with decarbonization. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. Actually, if our industries could convert more waste to energy while processing cement, I think the world will be a better place for us because of this. The emissions realized from the cement industry is actually a lot. Thank you very much, Annabelle, for that. Mr. Amoni, I would like to ask, as an ESG and sustainability professional, over the past few years, you must have seen organizations announce ambition. They set ambitions, net zero targets, and climate commitments. However, our stakeholders and investors are more interested in understanding how these commitments translate into measurable action rather than remaining statements in our sustainability report. In your opinion, what are the practical steps that organizations should take in they should take internally to ensure that these targets are not just symbolic but or feel good in their reports? So what steps do you feel organizations, practical steps they should take? So because most people write sustainability reports and what investors are looking for are not actually there. So in your opinion, what are the practical steps they should take internally to ensure that these targets are not just symbolic or feel good in their reports? Thank you. Mr. Harmony, can you hear me? If you can hear me, you're muted.
Sorry, confirm you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
yeah, thank you to your question. When you say the word green, net zero, most organizations today, what we have in industries, based on their reports, what they make public to the society, there's a word called greenwashing. Most of their reports are just greenwashed. They just want to do and
I was
they want
coming
to
to that.
they just want to do documents, center it out to the public because they are organizations, they want to be ESG compliant. But in a real sense, when you look at their report, if you pay attention to their metrics, their data and informations, data are totally greenwashed. And as you have said, internally, how do we align to net zero? One, we need to, first of all, understand our net zero commitment and move beyond just greenwashing aspirations, wishes, to real practical situation. We are integrating, embedding, and to embed our commitment into our business strategy and operations. We need to move from greenwashing states, aspirations, and wishes to real practical situations where we need to embed, we need to integrate, we need to inculcate, we need to put up a culture where our business will now be in line, and this in line in terms of strategies, which is either at a short-term strategy, mid-term, or a long-term. We need to integrate those into our businesses and operations. Again, as business, we need to set a baseline, a verified baseline. This baseline has to consider our emission categories, either at a scope 1 level, scope 2, and where necessary, a scope 3. We need to come up with a baseline as a business. Once this business and a baseline is established, one we're tending towards that net zero, which every organization wants to tend to. Again, we as an organization, we need to set up a strong governance system, a governance system where there must be a policies and governance structures. These governance structures has to take either from the root down up or sideways, but there must be a strong governance system for that business. With a strong governance system in that business, you see your net zero commitment come to practical terms and reality. Furthermore, you need to also set a scientific based target, science-based targets, not just targets, but it needs to be science-based. A science-based target with a clear milestones that rather than focusing on only a distant target, we need to set a science-based target with a clear milestones and how the plans, steps, and actions to achieve them. Furthermore, companies need to invest in clean energy efficiencies. They need to invest in renewable energy. Again, they need to invest in low carbon technologies. It's not about every technology, but we need to go into the route of low carbon technologies. Also, we need to reduce and propose or implement waste reduction strategies, as it has always been a very green point or a black point for which greenhouse emissions have always emitted. So we need to put up a system to see how we can reduce waste and or manage waste reduction, just as as one of our speakers has said, waste recycling. He talked about Lavage, and my colleague Annabelle talked about also a company that also into that same part. And again, we need to put up a system to achieve this, to achieve a net zero successfully. We need to put up a system that is scientific based, that is measurable, that is dedicated. We need to put up resources and put up an accountable system that cut across all levels of the organization. By doing these practical steps for what of time, I think net zero can be achieved and be sustained for that business. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmony. You've actually answered my question. And looking at greenwashing, actually, most sustainability reports, because everyone wants to feel, most people, I won't say everyone, want to feel good, like we've done this, we've done that. They tend to greenwash, and in that case they just mislead their audience. Going forward, I feel we all have a part to play, especially practitioners in this field, to ensure that we do the right thing and not just being pressured into doing anything we are told to do. That's why the knowledge is key. It's important because when we have key stakeholders buying, this makes it very practical and implementable. And I feel sustainability is it's something we do each day. It's just that some people don't want to take ownership of certain things they ought to do. Um, which are best going forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Harmony.
Thank you.
Dr. Walter, I know you've spoken a lot, you've said a lot, you've enlightened us on climate change in Africa, and we know that Africa, we are not heavy emitters, but the impact is mostly felt here in Africa. So I want to ask now, Nigeria, let's come back to our country. Today in Nigeria, especially our coastal regions, they are currently experiencing erosion, flooding, and rising sea levels. In practical terms, how prepared are we for these realities? Is Nigeria prepared for these realities? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so Nigeria preparedness actually remains, if I want to classify it, I'll put it at moderate because of the different agencies of government that has been established long time ago. That's the hydrological agency. What this agency does is to turn out early warning systems. So I'll place them on moderate, but with regards to that, insufficient that is actually relative to the scale of the threats. So despite the fact I grade them, we still have bucket of threats. If you look at our coastal states such as Lagos State, you look at Bayelsa, you look at Rivers State, you look at Delta states, even on those states, I think one of the students actually said, "Sir, you need to come to Ondo. The flood on the coastal shore is taking over our community." So those states on the coastal edge are already experiencing this increased coastal erosions, flooding. You have the saltwater intrusions and infrastructural damage along this way. So a lot of positive development have been made with regards to improved systems with our hydrological agency. Then also for Lagos, we have the construction of the coastal protection infrastructure, such as the Great Wall of Lagos. So we believe that if other states could either go towards this way, or if we can go back to our natural resource by using the mangrove, by restoring our mangrove, so we could have the expansion of our mangrove restorations and ecosystem initiative along this coastal region. Then we also need to have this kind of increased integration of climate risk into development planning. That means for us to be able to plan, we don't just want to turn out budget on a yearly basis that are not eco-friendly. We want to see how much is being spent on budget with regards to the environment. But despite these achievements, there's also significant gaps, which has to be with um, urban drainage systems. Our drainage systems is not up to, it's not there yet. We have block drainage, or not. Some communities have no drainage systems, which are often inadequate for extreme rainfall events. We also even have when you look at rapid urbanization, has actually increased settlements in these flood-prone areas, and that's why there's need for us to have our climate adaptation funding remains far below is what is required. And the last one is the public awareness and preparedness at the community level, which is still very, 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 very limited. So there's still work to be done. We are not there yet, but gradually, if we all put our hands together with the states, we could actually achieve more. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Actually, the public awareness is actually very low, and driving this message down to the the public requires a concerted effort of everyone on this table today. And then I hope this message goes round, because this is what Environment Day is all about. Everyone should be an environmental steward. Thank you very much, Dr. Water. Our audience, please, you can drop your questions in the chat box, which will be treated by attended to by our panelists. Thank you, Dr. Water. Okay, I also want to put this question across to you. Lately, over the streets of Lagos, we witness deaths everywhere. I don't know. I think there was a situation on this that arised the internet, and people said Lagos was clean, but actually recently, I think in the last 2 weeks, it's becoming a menace to us, because everywhere, I don't know, probably some areas where I go through, there is this waste dumping of waste everywhere, and now the floods are coming in due time. If care is not taken, the flood will roll these debts into the drainages, and we start having other issues, flooding and the likes. What do you think can the government do to curb this situation? Because it's really a pressing thing. Most people are complaining, community members are complaining, but they don't have the channel in which to reach out to our government officials up there. So how do you think this situation, what can we do as citizens, as governments and other stakeholders? What can be done about this? Thank you, sir.
All right. So with regards to waste management, and that's why I was actually clamoring that for you to have successful solutions to any climate issues, it must be designed with the community. So the question is, does the community want their environment to be clean? Because the government cannot literally clean all the environment. All right. So the question is, do I want my environment to be clean? So that's what I said. If you want to have successful solutions to our problem, it has to be designed with the community, and rather than for the community. So if you design it for the community, there won't be any breakthrough. If you design it with the community, you're going to have breakthrough. So in the cases, we have an CDA. So the CDA says everybody needs to come out to clean our estates. So a small community has decided to clean their estate probably every Saturday morning, with or regards whether there's environmental sanitation or not. That means the estate wants the environment to be clean. All right. So that is willingness. So you have a situation where then the second issue with Lagos is that number one, the waste management architecture is faulty. I think it has improved like before where we were before, but it has improved, but it's still not there. Let's take Mushin as an example. So the Mushin has a very big market, and the market women feels that at the close of the day, they all assemble their wastes at the middle of the road. The 4 weeks before the government comes. With the flood, most of the waste are going into the flood, blocking the drainages. So what does the law say in terms of compliance? If they don't comply, what happens to the market? You close the market today, a government official calls you tomorrow, open it, you load up. So you have a kind of recycled problem without no solution. So the question I usually ask, does Mushin want the environment to be clean? The answer is no. All right. So the answer is no. They don't want the environment to be clean. All right. And another thing, people complain of hike fee in what the waste management is charging. And people forget that the waste management trucks are currently running on diesel, some running on gas, and it's very expensive. And now the government is even planning to close down Lusosun and opening up expired dump sites, and it will even cost more for people.
Oh, I
Oh,
think we lost. Okay.
yeah, okay, right. So sorry for that. I think I had network issue. So it will even cost so the problem will still be there. So we need an holistic plan with the communities to say communities, just like what we did with the ban of the Okada. The ban of the Okada has been going on. Several governments has come, we ban Okada, we ban the Okada, we ban the Okada. So what the government of Sanwo-Olu did was to say, communities, if you don't want Okada to the activities of Okada in your local government, all right, agree and come, we'll log in your community into our database. All right, so community approach. So if you don't want it, not the government wanting it now, the community, if you don't want it, come forward and we'll add your community to that. And that's why some part of Lagos, there's Okada, and some part of Lagos, there's no Okada. So it's just the approach that needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Actually, the approach needs to change. So we need a community-based approach. I think from that perspective, we'll have better solutions to issues of waste in Lagos State. So I'll go quickly to the chat box. There are some questions here. Um, um, I think, Amoni, this question should go to you. What indicators should stakeholders track over the next 5 years to determine whether Africa is genuinely progressing towards climate resilience and sustainable development? What indicators should stakeholders track over the next 5 years to determine whether Africa is genuinely progressing towards climate resilience and sustainable development? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. From my own parts, from my own input, I will tell you it can be tracked in two different angles, from a leading perspective and from a lagging perspective. From a leading perspective, we want to look about training and competency. We need to put up a training system where we need to look at who are the persons that want to drive this process. Knowledge gap, we need to close the gap. If there is a gap closure, then we have the people that will drive the process. So within a space of 5 years, which is a cutoff point or a benchmark, how many persons do we intend to train? How do we intend to distribute these persons? And how do they intend to reach out? Knowledge transfer. So we have closed that gap. That is the leading part. The lagging part, we look about it in terms of incident indices, our data in terms of conflict, data in terms of stakeholders' grievances, data in terms of energy consumptions. Those are the data. When you look at this data, you cannot look at your projections. It will not give you an idea. It will not give you a base. It give you a baseline for which you want to make suggestions, for which you need to make mitigations or make contributions to. So I'm looking from the angle of leading and the angle of lagging. So when you have done your 2 base points end to end, it's now give you an idea how you intend to integrate this in a time frame of 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Money. I'm sure you've answered that question very well. Dr. Walter, I think this question is coming back to you. Said if Asia, from statistics, contributes over 50% of global climate emission yearly, why isn't there an increased global focus on Asia and the need to address its excessive emission?
Yeah, because if you look at Asia, is a continent that produces for the whole world. So when you see a typical Easterner, all road leads to China, all road leads to China, all road leads to Japan. What do you think they go there for? Production, technology, all right? So that is why, and each of these heavy equipment releases this so much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. All right. In the past, if you look at China, if you look at their visibility is usually poor. So when you look at somebody far off, you can't see that person until the person is close. So China themselves, they've actually put on real-time systems in place. So they've put on the polluter pay principle, where they put on different low-cost sensors in place to actually find most of those companies. But the interesting thing is, despite the polluter pay principle, companies are ready to pay any amount of money to pollute the environment. That is the most interesting thing. So companies are ready to pay any amount of environment. In fact, if you find a company $1 million, even some companies in the Niger Delta, they will pay just to flare the gas. They will pay. All right. So I think we need to change the approach totally. It's not even about Asia. If you say they should stop the CO2, what happens to your electric vehicle? Most of the electric vehicles, 40% comes from China. What about your smartphones? What happens to you if your phones fall down? So I think definitely we need to do away with our the eastern the east that particular continent has to do away with their heavy equipment, although there's migration to a newer technology, because it's actually the old equipment that tends to pollute more. And even when you look at energy use, it is even more. So we need to do away, like we need newer technologies in terms of equipment to be able to do the same function like what we have before. And this, our projection that it will tend to actually cut down this pollution level to a certain level. So literally, the troubles are there, all right. but literally, we need to look for other solutions. All right, we need to. China depends on the economy heavily. They are not like Nigeria. They depend on it as the way Nigeria depends on oil is where China depends on the manufacturer industry. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. I'll go to another quickly. Across sectors, many organizations have developed sustainability strategies and made public commitments to environmental responsibility. However, there is often a noticeable gap between policy and actual implementation. There's always a policy gap. So, from your experience, what distinguishes companies that successfully embed sustainability into their operations from those that struggle to move beyond ambition? Thank you, Annabelle.
Thank you, Rachel. So you kind of put the answer in your question. A lot of companies actually look at sustainability as an add-on when sustainability should be integrated into your process. Your process should have all of the things that make your business, more sustainable. Your carbon reduction technology should be included in your process. You should be looking at your local procurement, all of those things should be part of how you run your business, basically. But beyond that, and I don't think as sustainability professionals, we can emphasize this enough, management buy-in. If the management is not committed to, embedding that sustainability, it is going to be a huge struggle. It's going to be an uphill climb. And by management, I do not just mean like, oh, okay, you're maybe line manager or the head of department. From the board to the MD, CEO, it has to be something that the company is committed to. It should reflect in the policies that guide the operations. Management has to own the fact that they want the business to be sustainable. Also, there has to be clear targets. You cannot manage what you cannot measure. So if you are not measuring, there's nothing to manage. You have to set clear targets. You have to keep records and use those records to your own benefits. Improve on, your performance. If today maybe let's use local procurement, you achieved 54% local procurement. Next year it should be 70. It should keep improving. And if it's not improving, check what exactly it is. It even helps you manage better. Check what exactly it is that is stopping you from making those improvements in those different matrices or KPIs, that are particular to your business or your process. Check what is going on and make your improvements from there. If you're not able to embed sustainability in your process, if you don't have the management buy-in, if you're not measuring or tracking, it's going to be very, very difficult, for you to actually be a sustainable business or implement sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Actually, stakeholders buying, especially from the key stakeholders in the organization, it's very, very important for sustainability to thrive in an organization. Thank you, Annabelle. I'll go to Admiral. As climate impact intensifies, what practical steps should governments and security agencies take to strengthen resilience and protect critical coastal and maritime assets? So what practical steps do they take? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much once again. I think I have to go back to Dr. Walter's wonderful presentation because there's a lot of expo in that presentation to use. So when you're talking of practical steps, basically we have the early warning systems. He talked about the Nigerian Hydrological Service Agency that predicts, and the Nigeria Meteorological Agency that predicts weather patterns and the flood risk, advise the people and government on what to do, particularly those in floodplain areas, when to evacuate and all that. The other day I was looking at a report from, is it Bangladesh or something like that, where they had the cyclones that started in 1971, then up to 2022 or so, 2021, if I'm correct. The first cyclone that hit them, about 300,000 people died. But when they started implementing disaster management practices, they started incorporating climate resilience in their laws. The deaths from the cyclones started reducing because they had about, stand to be corrected, about 3-4 major cyclones that led to massive death. But it reduced from 300,000 down to like 100 and something thousand. Then the last one was just about 50 something. And this had to do with the strategies, leadership. So climate resilience was imputed in all their legislation, their laws, and their practices. For instance, in the Nigerian Navy and the Armed Forces generally, we have what we call disaster response units. Most of our units have been divided according to the zones, the 6 geopolitical zones. They have disaster response units. So all the military units and the naval bases are called out to respond in line with their humanitarian duties whenever there is this natural disaster. So they always carry out rehearsals, practices with FEMA and the other agencies to effect their response to any of these disasters, because we cannot actually stop nature from what happens. So of course, when we're talking about maritime infrastructure, we need to have hard engineering. We need to ensure that our piers, our jetties, the ports climate resilience by way of building structures that withstand whatever intensity of flood or sea level rise that come. Because when these are not properly done, we have disruptions in port activities, the economy, and all that. So we need to spend a lot of money to ensure that this engineering technology are applied so that we don't spend double when it is time. So we need to build roads, especially the coastal road they are building now. We need to build them above the sea level, because you have to look at the data, taking into consideration AI, the big data, all the sea level rise have occurred over time. We have the National Hydrographic Agency that normally compile the data for the current, the tide. So they should be able to give an estimation of the sea level rise and actually build the roads so that even when the sea level rise comes, it doesn't affect the roads. And the other day I saw in the news, the federal government are building trees in the Lagos Coastal Road, Sokoto Badagry Highway. This is environment sustainable practices to act as shelter and to be climate resilient in case there is any issue with coastal erosion and all that. So one other important aspect we need to do, like what doctor said, is the forest conservation, protection, mangrove protection. The other day I saw in the news the National Council on Climate Change went to Bayelsa to actually look at the mangrove forest, and they found that some areas did not really have mangrove protection because mangrove serves as a buffer for flooding and saltwater and all that. So they are making efforts to ensure that proper restoration of mangrove, the forest. Then we also have the seawall, the Great Wall of Lagos. I didn't even know that it was as a result of trying to build that seawall in Lagos that they came up with the Atlantic, Eco-Atlantic City project. They gave them a concession to build. And it's such a wonderful place. Where you go, you see the wave breakers, the boulders and everything. You can actually, it's fun to see the Atlantic Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and you see the waves coming, but they cannot reach the wall. I remember when we were junior officers, we used to go to the bar beach and see the kites, and sometimes even Victoria Island was flooded, but these are things of the past. So the mangrove restoration project is very important. The seawall, some places they have dikes like in Ghana and some other places. And of course, the Nigerian Navy will have the maritime domain awareness system, which can use drones. Now, people use drones to actually monitor tidal prediction, wave actions, tidal occurrences. So we can actually input this data and actually create flood risk areas and advise government on what to do. So there's a lot to do, and sincerely, I think the government is trying in the aspect of flood prediction, because recently they gave flood warnings. We can see the Lagos Great Wall and the action by the National Climate Council going to Bayelsa. I'm so passionate about Bayelsa, checking the mangrove restoration. And of course, if maybe they have done something like that in that Fuveme, the community that I talked about earlier, probably they will have saved the community. The BBC interview was so touching when the people had to relocate. 2023, that place is submerged, and it was likened to the situation in Bayelsa when there was a lot of flooding. But with mangrove restoration, early warning system by our government agencies, hard engineering of our maritime infrastructure, I think it will help to address these problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral. I'm sure there's actually a lot we all have to do, including the government and we as individuals and other organizations. We actually have a lot to do in this aspect. Thank you very much. There's a lot of questions in the chat box. I'm not sure we can address everything, but I'll just read some, and our panelists, I'd like us to answer some of these questions. From a system thinking perspective, how can African governments and organizations embed climate resilience, sustainability, and risk management into long-term development planning rather than treating climate action as a standalone initiative? Another questions here is considering the estimated climate finance needs of Africa and the current funding gap, which financing mechanism do you believe has the greatest untapped potential over the next decade, and what must happen to unlock it? And the last question we'll take is how do we get to infiltrate the circle of politics where the decision making on climate change is made so that we can present the argument for more grants over loans? Let me just add one more, so we'll just take it one. If you could recommend one urgent action for businesses and individuals to curb climate action, what will it be? Thank you very much, our panelists. I'd like us to just treat these questions quickly and we'll call it a day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Rachel. Hello, Rachel.
Yes, I can hear you.
Please, can you take back the question number 1?
The first question, okay. From a systematic thinking perspective, how can African governments and organizations embed climate resilience, sustainability, and risk management into long-term development planning rather than treating climate action as a standalone initiative?
Okay, thank you, colleagues. From my own input on this, one, I will tell you it has to do with funding availability, just like what Dr. Waters said. It's not about loan, but grants. Climate grant financing, it's one. 2, we need to have competency, knowledge transfer. 3, we will have to come up with a system of not just greenwashing, but coming up with data, verifiable data. Have a data system that are verifiable for a long time. Again, we need to come up with a culture, implement a culture at all levels, community-based driven approach, not government-based driven approach. Because once you have a community-based driven approach, as stated by the expo from Dr. Walter, everybody keys into it. Everybody plays into the path. Everybody follows that trend because they are part of the process. They are stakeholders whose input we are captured from onset. So there is a buy-in. Because there is a buy-in, there is sustenance and there is implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, someone has to pick another question in no particular order. Thank you.
Okay, can I talk?
Sir.
Yeah, I just want to say something generally, but I'm going to digress a little bit to go into the maritime environment, the maritime industry, which is my field. Interestingly, when I was reading a lot about this climate change, I came across the common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities is a principle that is embedded in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change for taking into consideration the different, like Dr. Walter said, the polluter principle. We are just contributing 4%, and the other countries are parts are contributing higher. So taking into consideration that this climate change affects all of us, and we have the responsibility to address it, and we don't have the same capabilities. There is what he said, the global alliances. I know that the International Maritime Organization in planning to meet its net zero framework by around 2050 has come up with several funds, particularly for the shipping sector, because the shipping sector contributes about 3% of the carbon emissions. So they are mandated by the Paris Agreement, the Kyoto Protocol, and the International Convention for Preventing Maritime Pollution to curb these emissions. So taking into fact of these differentiated responsibilities and capabilities, they have come up with a Green Voyage 2050 program with some well-developed countries like Norway, France, to support developing countries that don't have the capacity to come up with the technologies, with the finance and all that to transit to renewable energy. So NIMASA, the Ministry of Blue and Marine Economy, they're working with IMO on this to ensure that we'll fulfill our own part of ensuring reduction in greenhouse emissions from ships coming around to us, and also the issue of training, like Mr. Amoni said, technology transfer, capacity building, for the future fuels, marine fuels that we're going to use and all that. Because these mitigation actions are very important, because the globalized world, the developed countries are looking more at your mitigation than your adaptive strategy, because that is where they really want to finance the viable green project. So if we continue to have the global alliances properly, and like what Annabelle said, KPIs, accountability, we should be able to be on the pathway to decarbonization and ensuring that we have a good climate for our yet unborn generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admira. Thank you. Does anyone want to go next?
Okay, so I would go with the question of urgent action for businesses and individuals. So I would say that as much as we're making noise, I do not believe that a lot of people really know what climate change is and how far-reaching the impacts are. So a simple action I would say would be, or that I would suggest would be to get to know more. And in getting to know more, you would definitely see certain things that you can implement, in your day-to-day or into your business, depending on your business processes that could actually help, to combat climate change. I strongly believe, and I think I said that when I was answering my first question, that we cannot, put our development on hold, because we have to fight climate change. It has to be something that we would do simultaneously, be conscious of our actions towards the climate while we continue to develop our continent. So it's important that we as individuals get to know more about the impacts of climate change, the actions that cause it, how we can either adapt or the mitigation strategies we can implement. And I believe that is one serious action that we can take that would help. And then the rest just, flows in from there. Thank you.
All right, Annabelle, thank you very much. Um, that was a valid contribution. Thank you. Dr. Walter, do you have anything to say?
No. Except there's any specific questions you want me to add, but none for now.
Okay, at this point, I would just like us, our panelists, just give a final word. What are we leaving our audiences with? Because we have a lot of questions coming in and we're pressed for time. So just a final word to the audience out there, to Nigeria, to Africa as a whole, on climate action. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Dr. Walter. Thank you, Ray Admira. Annabelle, thank you, audience and everyone. On a final note, I want to say sustainability is no longer an environmental issue, but it has an element of economic, it has an element of social, it has an element of business narrative. So you must have to see sustainability not just only an environmental angle. You must have to see from the social perspective, the economic perspective, and the business perspective. And also, you need to understand that while discussing net zero commitment, there must be energy transition or sustainable transportation that largely depends between collaborations. Collaboration in this case, we're talking about the government agencies, the individuals, the host communities, businesses, individuals, and the rest. So as much as we want to talk about sustainability, we have to understand that the decision we make today will determine the resilience and sustainability of future generations. Sustainability and development can go alongside simultaneously. That's one point we need to drive home. One cannot stop for the other to take. Those two can go simultaneously when all the right actions are being understudied, identified, and addressed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ramoni. Annabelle is going to next.
I don't know if I really have anything to add. I believe I have, would I say, said most of, what I have to say. But I'll just say that this is not, I don't know, I'm going to put this is like an ongoing, it's an action, it's an ongoing action basically. We do not have I would not say we have an end goal, because the honest truth is for each target that we set, there's going to be something new, there's going to be something else to achieve. But I would just say that as much as you can, try to be part of the solution, and try to learn how you can contribute towards, ensuring that we are not contributors to climate change, but instead we are managing, mitigating, and adapting as we should. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very Okay, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity once again. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, so thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity, because this is an avenue for us to create more awareness on the effects of climate change. To me, like I said, from Bayelsa, we felt it, and many people became aware. So it's imperative that we not only do seminars like this to create more awareness, but even include it in school curriculums, so that people they say catch them young. I was looking at the climate activist from Sweden, Greta Thunberg. She has really done a lot in terms of climate impact awareness. So we need to have many more Greta Thunbergs in this part, in Africa and Nigeria, to talk about the effects. Because if we don't do something about it, then the world will be very unbearable for us. And thank you, Dr. Walter, for that insightful presentation. I'm going to take it and, with your permission, use it for most of my work. And I hope to see Mr. Moni and lovely Annabelle and Rachel. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity, and keep on doing this good work for the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Dr. Water, last word from you, please.
Yeah, so my concluding statement will be, despite the fact that we need to, looking at the economic development, so our environment should go pari passu with what we have. So you don't have, I want to see in Nigeria, I don't want to see a Nigeria whereby we are clearing the forest reserve that is meant to store carbon just because you want to do a real estate. I don't want to see in Nigeria where we use more air conditions and we are depleting. If you go to Okomu Forest, the relative humidity in that forest is 85 degrees Celsius. That is very high, to a point by if you spread a cloth, it will take around 14 days to dry. That means the clothes doesn't dry there. The place is very cool. There's no AC. People there sleep peacefully. But you will see the governments are gradually selling the forest reserve, and nobody's saying anything. They're selling it. The forests have been depleted. I see in Nigeria where the temperature will rise to 58 degrees Celsius. It will be so hot to a point by nobody will no longer wear agbada, will no longer wear suits to work. It will be so hot. So I don't want us to run on the fact that the environment should just end up in the archive. Your reporting should end up in the archive. Your reporting should inform policies. We need to be at the government. We need to review outdated laws, outdated policies. We need to be there. Our voice needs to be held. We need to continue pushing to make sure that the planet is safe, not just for us, but the future ahead. So thank you, everyone, and God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Walter. Thank you, Admiral. Thank you, Mr. Amoni, and thank you, Mr. Annabelle. And this has been an insightful and educative session, and I'm sure our audience have learned a lot from it. And Dr. Walter, the audience are asking if your slide can be made available to them, so that we
Yeah,
can.
yeah. I'm
Okay,
sending
so
it
that would be
immediately. Yeah,
okay.
immediately to
That's
you.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. So thank you very much. So we've actually learned a lot today, and from what we've seen today, it's obvious that Africa contributes very little to greenhouse gas emission, but the adverse effect is mostly felt here. So as individuals, and organizations, NGOs, and government, Let's try to continue this conversation. Let's take it to the grassroots. Let's not end it at this platform. Let it not just end because tomorrow is World Environment Day, or we had this discussion today and it ends here. Let's raise the awareness. Let's raise the awareness of climate change. Let's educate people on what they ought to do in order to mitigate the adverse effect of climate change. Thank you very much, everyone. We sincerely appreciate you, appreciate our audience. Thank you for your time. I will hand over to my colleague Amy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Rachel. And yes, indeed, this session was very educative. Like I said, it could have been a masterclass. Thank you so much to our panelists, our speaker, our keynote speaker, our moderator. Thank you to the participants, our sponsors, every one of you for being here. We've learned a lot, and over the last few minutes, we've heard powerful perspectives on climate change, implementation changes, innovation, accountability, and so many opportunities for Africa. I would just like to do a quick audience exercise here. So for our participants, just in one word, what climate issues worries you the most in your community? Just tell us in the chat box. Is it flooding? Is it food insecurity? Is it extreme heat? Is it poor waste management or deforestation, energy access? Just let us know one quick option. All right. Again, I just want to thank the panelists. I think I have one question for all of the panelists, just one. I'd like to end by saying that let's imagine this is World Environment Day 2036, in 10 years from now. What is one climate action or climate decision that Africa must make today? Just one, only one, so that we can keep this brief. So just one decision Africa must make today if we want that future generation, like Admiral said, to thank us rather than to question us. Just one decision we can take now. I will start with Admiral.
Okay, one decision we can take now is to really the global alliances, because of the capacity gap that we have. So we need to really strengthen that and really work with the donors, the financiers, so that we're on our way to meeting our targets, because all countries have been given targets and we all have national determined contributions we have to make in line with the Paris Agreement. So we need to look at the contributions we need to make and check them. Are we meeting the checkpoint, the timelines, and all that? So with that, if we follow that, we should be able to get to a reasonable level by 2036. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I will throw the question to Amoni. Just one action we can take now, preferably on an individual basis. What is something the next person can do right now?
For the next person, you go to very minimal. We'll talk about waste management, which is the simplest waste management, effective waste management, starting from your purchasing, your supply chain process, to your segregation, your handling, and your final disposal. That cuts across every sector and everybody in the society. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I agree with that too as well. In as much as we might not be all in waste management systems, we all contribute to waste. So we can definitely handle our waste better. Over to you, Annabelle. What is one action we can do?
Okay, as cliche as it might sound, plant a tree. Trees offer so many benefits.
Yes.
So I grew up in a house where I had a tree by my window, and my room used to be like the meeting point for everybody in the house because my room was so cool, very, very cool. When there's no lights, where there's light, my room was always cool. So plant a tree. If you plant it now, in 10 years, it should be able to provide you shade. It might provide you fruits if it is a fruit tree. Plant a tree.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And that actually is so important because the housing developments lately, they do involve trees. Like you'll be seeing artificial grass why when we have natural grass we could have trees. I remember, like you said, the compounds too that I grew up in, they had trees. We had mango trees. We stay there, we sing songs. Thank you so much for that. All right, I will end with Dr.
One last contribution, please.
Okay, sure, Admiral, go ahead.
So what I want to do personally is to buy an electric vehicle, at least to be able to reduce
Oh,
emissions. Yes.
okay, that is
Yes.
good. Yeah,
Okay, thank
and
you. All right.
we've been seeing, sure, we've been seeing a recent spike in electric vehicles in
Sure.
Nigeria. I've been seeing a lot on the road. That's very nice. Admiral, were you going to buy for two?
I'll
Admiral,
think
sir.
about it. Sir,
Okay.
Admiral, sir.
yes, please. I'm
While
on
you're
it.
considering, while you're considering to buy your electric vehicle, also consider the impact and the management. Talking
Okay,
about
sir.
from your process of where your waste management from the life cycle process. How do you intend to manage
Okay.
it? It's not about just buying the electric vehicle. We also need to consider the cradle to grave or cradle to grave, whatever the process is. You need to also consider that factor because most of them have mercury, which are also hazardous in the process and also come to impact the environment. So while you're doing to buy this because you want to reduce the amount of GHG emission, also look at the cycle and how you intend to manage the end cycle of your product. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so yes, Dr. Walter, please. What is one contribution the next person can make to effect a change?
Yeah, then one of the major one is it has to do for me, everything everyone has said is correct. Yeah, all our points are salient. It has to be a bottom-up approach. So definitely, communities must be empowered to actually participate actively. The reason why we're having these issues is that it's a up-down approach. So one person stays somewhere, make laws for the person at the bottom to implement. So the person at the bottom is telling you the laws of Nigeria is not for
Hi, Dr. Walter. I think
yeah.
we just came back on.
Yeah, definitely. So
Yes.
definitely, my approach would be that the community should be empowered to participate actively. The community, then we have to look at where we have the private sector should definitely probably expand on green investment because anything about environment, you need money. Even the trees you want to plant, you need money. A one strand of plants now before used to be like 400 naira for a strand. But ever since we started the tree planting, it has gone up to 1,600 per strand. So we need a lot of donor agency to be able to say, I'll be able to purchase 5,000 nurseries for you to plant. I need 4,000. So for me, it has to be a community-led approach. That's the action. Go back to the drawing board. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you once again to our panelists. Those were great answers. And I hope that it has inspired every one of us, because I know that I've taken something home to show us that we can effect change one at a time. We don't even have to, we don't have to wait for everyone all at once. We can do something on our own. And I see the responses in the chat box. I see flooding, extreme heat, food security, and that's very true. It's not surprising because many of us have had days where a 30 minutes rainfall suddenly turns into a swimming pool that we never signed up for. Thank you so much for your responses. All right. So we'll be coming to the end of this wonderful webinar. This webinar was hosted today in commemoration of the World Environment Day that would actually be happening tomorrow. So we wanted to do it today. So to everyone who has asked questions, everyone who has shared comments, contributed to today's discussion, thank you so much. What gives me hope today living here is that climate change is is not that climate change is easy to solve. It actually is not. But what gives me hope is that every year more people are joining this conversation. This is the fifth edition. So this is the fifth year that we're doing this, and we see more and more turnout of people who are interested in joining the conversation. More innovators are creating solutions, more communities are taking action. If there's anything I want us to leave here today with, it is that climate action is not about saving a distant planet. It is about protecting all the places we call home right now. So thank you once again. I think we should take a group picture. Let's take a group picture. So let everybody just pose. Please turn on your cameras. Strike a nice pose. And I think I should lead the count. Let me lead the count. So on 1, 2, 3, and then I capture. So 1, 2, 3. That's good. That was very good. We'll share with you. I think we should say something like 1, 2, 3, WED. How about that? Let's try
Okay.
that. Let's try that. Okay.
So I didn't
So
hear that.
okay, I said on 3 we should say WED, World Environment Day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, WED.
WED.
Thank you
WED.
so much,
Yeah.
everyone. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being
Thank you
here.
so much.
Thank you for
Yeah.
giving us your time.
Yeah.
Stay safe, stay engaged, stay committed. Let's keep building the Africa that we want to see. Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
happy
you.
World Environment Day in advance.
You too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
A-Line Media Limited is a strategic communications and advisory firm. We empower businesses in Nigeria and internationally to achieve their goals through effective communication, brand building, and impactful sustainability and ESG strategies. We offer a range of services, including custom publishing, corporate events, and learning experiences, all designed to meet your unique needs. Our services speaks for itself. We've partnered with multinational leaders in telecommunications, finance, and oil and gas to deliver impactful results. From crafting powerful educational materials to implementing effective ESG strategies, we help organizations achieve their goals. Ready to achieve impactful results? At AML, we partner with leading organizations to craft strategic communication and sustainability solutions to drive real business value. Let's discuss your goals and explore how our expertise can empower your success. Let's get started. Contact our team of communication and sustainability experts today to discuss your unique needs. We are confident we can craft a solution that empowers your organization's success.